Carnivine is one of those Pokemon similar to Lumineon in the aspect that Carnivine is one of the most forgettable Pokemon. Carnivine was used by James in the Pokemon Diamond and Pearl anime, but for some reason people still forget about this Pokemon. That might just be because Carnivine is one of the worst Pokemon to ever be created. If you guys are unfamiliar, in this series we take a look at some of the worst Pokemon in the game. We discuss if they are completely useless or if they have some sort of viable use in the game. Each Pokemon we rated on a scale 1 to 5 based on offense, defense, versatility, move pool, and overall viability. If a Pokemon doesn't excel in any of these categories, then it is deemed to be one of the worst Pokemon. If one of the Pokemon discussed in this series happens to be one of your favorite Pokemon, I do apologize, but just because a Pokemon is your favorite doesn't mean it's safe from being in one of these videos. If you guys enjoy this series, you want to see more, make sure you subscribe and leave a like, and let me know in the comments down below what Pokemon you want to see featured on this series in the future, and don't forget to check out the full playlist link in the description down below to see what Pokemon have been featured already. Also, keep in mind that Pokemon that get Mega Evolutions and Pokemon that are NFEs do not count. Obviously, a Pokemon like Pidgey or some other not fully evolved Pokemon like Weedle, they are pretty bad. We know that. There's no point in really making a video on them. So to give an overview on Carnivine, Carnivine is a mono grass type Pokemon with the ability Levitate as its only ability, and it was introduced in Generation 4. Carnivine's stat distribution is 74 in HP, 100 in attack, 72 in defense, 90 in special attack, 72 in special defense, and 46 in speed. This thing doesn't seem completely useless, but like most lower tier grass types, there's always a better grass type, such as Leafeon, that just pretty much outclasses this thing. So with that being said, let's take a look at some of the positives. So the first positive for Carnivine is it gets the ability Levitate. Now this thing is a grass type, so having Levitate isn't the best thing in the world, but at the same time, being immune to a type is always very, very good. Being able to switch into a ground type for free, essentially, taking no damage, something that is very nice. It is its only ability, but at least it's something that's somewhat useful. It also has base 100 attack, like I said earlier, which isn't the worst stat in the world. Having a stat of 100 is somewhat redeemable for this Pokemon. You do get Power Up as well, which is nice, so you can do some decent damage with an Adamant Nature and Power Whip, but at the same time you're kind of slow, so you're not going to really outspeed anything. This Pokemon also gets Knockoff, Sleep Powder, Rage Powder if you're playing doubles, I guess, Leech Seed, Infestation, Gastric Acid could be cheeky to suppress your opponent's ability, and Synthesis of course is a good recovery move. Decent utility options there, not the best, but there certainly is something there. And for the last positive, this is kind of a little bit of a reach because I really couldn't think of very many positives for Carnivine, but the bulk really isn't the worst. 74 HP, 72 defense, 72 special defense. It is super mediocre, but at the same time, it's slightly below average. It's not the worst thing in the world, so considering the way the series goes, I will consider that a positive. And now on to the negatives, and of course, there's more negatives than the positives. The first negative, this Pokemon has such a shallow move pool. Like, if you're running an offensive set, it's hard to find 4 physical offensive moves to run on the thing because it just gets barely any moves. It has such little coverage options to go on top of that because the move pool is so shallow that you're pretty much not going to really be doing anything except for clicking a grass type attack. 46 speed is also really bad because you're super slow, your bulk is super mediocre, so you're really not going to take hits too well, and you're not going to outspeed anything. So unless you're like in Trick Room or something, this thing is pretty useless. Even in Trick Room, 46 speed is a little bit too high because a lot of things, especially in lower tiers, have speed stats that are sub 40, so having 46, even in Trick Room, like, it's not really the best. Another negative is I'm not really sure what this Pokemon is supposed to be. You got the 100 in attack, then you have the 90 in special attack, which really isn't that bad as well. You're really so low with 46 speed, but then your defenses really aren't that great to complement you. So this Pokemon's kind of just like a mess stat-wise. I'm not really sure what it's supposed to be. It also gets Levitate, which is weird because it's a plant, and I understand how a plant can get Levitate when plants literally come from the ground. Either way, all around, this Pokemon doesn't really make a lot of sense. Another negative, like I said earlier, is this thing is outclassed by so many low-tier grass types like Leafeon. Leafeon's kind of become like an MVP in this series because I always mention how things are outclassed by Leafeon, such as Sunflora in a video in the past, which you should totally check out by the way if you haven't already, but there's really no reason to use this thing over a Leafeon. Another negative is this thing has a slightly better special move pool, despite the lower special attacks compared to its attack. Now, this is the case for a lot of Pokemon. There are a few Pokemon that have a better physical move pool than a special move pool, but then their stats say otherwise. So it is a negative, but it's not the worst negative at the same time. And now let's get on to the rating. So in terms of offense, I'll be a little generous and give this thing a 2 out of 5 because base 100 with stat power whip really isn't horrible. You can do some damage with that. And 90 in special attack really isn't the worst thing in the world. It lacks speed, which is a big reason why I can't give it anything higher than a 2 out of 5. It doesn't have bulk to go behind that, so I can't give it higher over 2 out of 5. And the move pool, I can't give it higher than a 2 out of 5 because of all these reasons. I feel like even a 2 is a little bit generous. For defense, I'm going to also give it a 2 out of 5. The defenses in the 70s really aren't the worst. They're pretty mediocre, but at the same time, when you take a look at things featured in the past, there are a lot of things worse than that. Synthesis and Leech Seed also help out a bit with the defense because you can heal up on that, which is very, very nice. And you do have Levitate. You know, having an immunity, although it's kind of a weird immunity, is something to keep in mind, and it definitely does help you out from a defensive standpoint. In terms of versatility, I will give this thing a 1 out of 5. There really isn't much you can do with this thing, which is the biggest issue. The best set would probably just be a max attack and max HP stat with 4 attacks, possibly Synthesis or Sleep Powder in there and then 3 attacks, but at the same time, just finding 3 good offensive attacks on this Pokemon is hard because its move pool is so shallow. And speaking of move pool, I will give this thing a 1 out of 5 for move pool, as I'm sure you guys saw all that coming. Now, this thing probably has the shallowest move pool out of everything featured on this series so far. It gets Power Whip, which is a pretty good move, gets some other okay grass type moves. Outside of grass type moves, its strongest physical attacks are Bug Bite and Knock Off, which really aren't the best physical attacks in the world. Knock Off is nice, but having Bug Bite as your 3rd strongest physical attack really isn't the best. Especially gets Sludge Bomb and Giga Drain, which is nice because Sludge Bomb is always nice. But the thing is, like, your 3rd move is going to be a hidden power, and then after that, if you're running a special set, there really isn't a good 4th move to run. I guess Infestation or Synthesis, that's the biggest problem with this Pokemon. You hear a lot of good Pokemon have what's called 4 move syndrome, where there's so many good moves they get that you can't pick 4 because there's so many good moves. This Pokemon has the opposite, where it's hard to find 4 good moves to run on this thing if you're running it offensively. Defensively, it's a bit easier because you have Leech Seed, you have Synthesis, and you run Knock Off even then. But at the same time, it's like, when you can't even find 4 good moves to run on this thing, I think that's a sign this Pokemon has a horrible move pool. And for Viability, I will give Carnivine a 1 out of 5. There is nothing that Carnivine does better than any other grass-type Pokemon, even in the lowest of low tiers. I guess the only advantage it has is Levitate, being immune to ground, but that really isn't much of an advantage when you're a grass-type. And like I said earlier, it just gets completely outclassed by Leafeon. Now, I guess you could possibly run some sort of gimmicky set with Spit Up and stuff like that, because it does get those moves, but at the same time, like, it's not the best option for this thing. There really isn't a best option for this thing, to be honest. If I had to pick the best possible set for this thing, like I said earlier, it would just be offensive, max HP, 3 physical attacks, and then like Synthesis or something like that, because there's just nothing else to put in there. So in closing, that is Carnivine. Is Carnivine the worst Pokemon ever? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Personally, I don't think this is the worst Pokemon we featured in this series so far, but it still is pretty bad. I think that if this thing had slightly better defenses, maybe in the mid-80s, maybe a slightly higher attack set of like 110, and more offensive moves like Earthquake to deal with fire types, it would actually be a pretty okay Pokemon. If you guys want to see a Pokemon featured in this series in the future, let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and check out the full playlist link of this series in the description. Have a good rest of your day. I will see you guys next time, and bye-bye.